It was just another busy afternoon at a small diner tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as waitresses hustled from table to table, balancing trays of steaming food and smiling at customers. Among them was Emily, a young woman in her 20s who always carried a warm smile, even on the most exhausting days. She wasn't just there to earn her paycheck. Emily truly cared about people. She believed that kindness could make a difference, no matter how small the gesture. That day, as Emily cleared plates and refilled coffee mugs, she noticed a man lingering outside the diner's glass door. His clothes were worn, his face shadowed by days without rest, and his eyes spoke of hardship. He hesitated to come inside, shuffling nervously, as if he didn't belong. It was clear he hadn't had a proper meal in a while. Emily's heart sank. She had seen people like him before, lost, forgotten, and invisible to the world. Without thinking twice, she approached the man, gently opened the door, and invited him in. "Hey, why don't you come inside? It's warm, and I'll get you something to eat." The man's tired eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, he hesitated before nodding. She guided him to a quiet booth in the corner and brought him a menu. "Order whatever you like," she said softly. The man looked at her, his voice cracking as he said, "Thank you. I don't have any money." Emily shook her head and smiled. "Don't worry about it. Just enjoy the meal." While the man hungrily ate the burger and fries she brought him, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. She didn't know his story, but she knew she had done the right thing. What she didn't know was that her small act of kindness would soon set off a chain of events she never could have imagined. Her manager, Mr. Grayson, wasn't as compassionate. Known for his strict rules and no-nonsense attitude, he spotted the interaction from behind the counter. His face turned red with frustration. To him, rules were rules. No freebies, no exceptions. "Emily," he barked, storming over to her. The entire diner went silent as his voice cut through the chatter. Emily turned, startled. "What do you think you're doing?" Her heart raced as she tried to explain. "He's hungry, Mr. Grayson. He doesn't have anyone. I just thought." "You thought?" he interrupted. "This is a business, not a charity. If you want to feed every homeless person who walks in here, then maybe you should pay for it out of your own pocket." Emily stood frozen, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment as customers stared. "I was just trying to help," she whispered. But Mr. Grayson wasn't done. He pointed to the door and said, "If you can't follow the rules, you can leave. You're fired." The room went dead silent. Emily felt a lump in her throat as tears welled in her eyes. She grabbed her apron, quietly apologized to the homeless man, and walked out of the diner. 30 minutes later, as Mr. Grayson settled back into his routine, the bell above the door jingled. He looked up, expecting another customer. But instead, a tall figure walked in, dressed in a simple black jacket and jeans, wearing sunglasses that didn't quite hide the unmistakable face of a Hollywood superstar. It was Keanu Reeves. Everyone in the diner froze, their eyes glued to him. Why was he here? What did he want? And more importantly, how did he know what had just happened? What happened next left everyone speechless and changed Emily's life forever. Mr. Grayson stood behind the counter, his jaw tightening as Keanu Reeves removed his sunglasses and glanced around the diner. The usual hum of conversation and clinking dishes had been replaced by an eerie silence, as if the air itself had shifted with his presence. Customers whispered to one another, some sneaking glances, others staring outright. Keanu, however, seemed unfazed by the attention. His calm demeanor carried a weight that wasn't intimidating but was impossible to ignore. He approached the counter, his steady gaze fixed on Mr. Grayson. "I heard there was some trouble here earlier," he said, his voice low and even. "Mind if I ask you about it?" Mr. Grayson stiffened, unsure how to respond. No trouble, just handling a situation." "Nothing you need to worry about, Mr. Reeves." He forced a nervous laugh, but his hands fidgeted with the towel he was holding. Keanu didn't break eye contact. "I think I do need to worry about it. Someone told me about a waitress who showed kindness to a man in need, and she got punished for it." His words were calm, but carried an edge that made everyone in the room hang on each syllable. The diner's customers leaned in closer, curiosity buzzing through the air. No one dared interrupt. Even the homeless man, still sitting quietly in the corner, seemed to sit up straighter, unsure if this was all real or just a strange dream. Emily, meanwhile, had been sitting on the curb outside, her face buried in her hands. She hadn't gone far. She was too shaken to move. She had given her heart to this job, not because it paid well, but because she loved connecting with people. And now, in a single moment, it was all gone. She didn't notice the sleek black car parked down the block or the man who had stepped out and entered the diner. But as the minutes ticked by, she started hearing murmurs from inside, a shift in energy she couldn't quite explain. Wiping her eyes, she cautiously stood up and peeked through the window. Her breath caught in her throat. Was that Keanu Reeves? Back inside, Mr. Grayson tried to regain control of the situation. Look, Mr. Reeves, I run a business here. We can't just give away food for free. If we did, we'd have people lining up outside every day. You understand that, right? His voice wavered slightly, betraying his attempt at confidence. Keanu tilted his head, studying the man for a moment. I understand business. But I also understand humanity. You can't put a price on compassion. He glanced around the diner, making eye contact with a few of the patrons who nodded in silent agreement. Sometimes doing the right thing costs a little, but the impact it leaves? That's priceless. Mr. Grayson swallowed hard, realizing he was quickly losing the room. His usual bluster wasn't working, not against someone like Keanu. Still, he doubled down. With all due respect, Mr. Reeves, you don't know what it's like to run a place like this. I've got bills to pay, employees to manage. Keanu raised a hand, cutting him off. His expression remained calm, but there was a quiet authority in his tone. I don't need to run a diner to know when someone's been wronged. Where's Emily, the waitress you fired? The room grew even quieter, if that was possible. A few customers shifted in their seats, glancing toward the windows where Emily was still standing, half hidden behind the curtain. Mr. Grayson hesitated, torn between doubling down and admitting his mistake. She's outside, he finally muttered. Keanu nodded and turned toward the door without another word. As he walked past the booths and tables, he paused briefly near the homeless man. Good meal, he asked gently. The man, still in disbelief, nodded quickly. Yes, thank you. I didn't know he trailed off, overwhelmed. Keanu gave him a small smile before stepping outside. Emily, startled to see him coming toward her, wiped her face quickly, hoping he wouldn't notice her tears. Emily, he asked, his voice soft but steady. She blinked, unsure how to respond. Why, yes. I'm Emily. I heard what happened, he said, his tone kind. I want you to know you did the right thing. What you did for that man, it matters. Emily's heart raced. She couldn't believe this was happening. Thank you, she managed to say, her voice trembling. But I lost my job. I don't know what I'm going to do now. Keanu studied her for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. Then he said, sometimes when one door closes, another opens. I think this might be one of those times. Emily furrowed her brow, unsure what he meant. Before she could ask, he added, come back inside with me. There's something we need to take care of. Hesitant, but intrigued, Emily followed him back into the diner. The moment they stepped through the door, all eyes turned to them. The customers who had been silently rooting for her now looked at her with admiration, as if her bravery had been validated by Keanu's presence. Mr. Grayson looked visibly uncomfortable, his earlier confidence completely eroded. Keanu walked up to him and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. You made a mistake today. But mistakes can be fixed. The question is, are you willing to fix this one? Mr. Grayson opened his mouth to respond but hesitated. He could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed heavily. Fine. Emily, you can have your job back. A small cheer broke out among the customers, but Keanu wasn't done. That's a start, he said, his tone firm. But you should also know the value of what she did. She reminded all of us that kindness matters. It's not just about running a business. It's about being human. Mr. Grayson shifted uncomfortably, clearly out of his depth. I guess you're right, he muttered. Emily, still processing everything, looked at Keanu with gratitude and disbelief. She couldn't understand why someone like him would go out of his way for her. Why are you doing this? She finally asked. Keanu smiled softly. Because I've been where that man was once. Hungry, tired, and invisible. Someone showed me kindness when I needed it most. I'm just paying it forward. The weight of his words settled over the room, leaving everyone in quiet reflection. But even as the tension began to lift, there was a lingering sense that the story wasn't over yet. Something about this moment felt bigger than any of them could fully grasp. Emily didn't know it yet, but her act of kindness was about to change her life in ways she never could have imagined. The diner buzzed with an air of excitement and disbelief. Emily's heart raced as she stood by Keanu, unsure of what to say or how to process everything. She glanced at the homeless man in the corner, who offered her a shy, grateful smile. Somehow, her small act of kindness had brought her to this moment, but it still didn't feel real. Mr. Grayson, visibly flustered, tried to regain control. Look, she's got her job back, okay? Let's just get back to normal here. His words felt hollow, and everyone in the diner could sense it. But Keanu wasn't quite finished. He turned to Emily, his voice softer now. Do you want to come back to this job? Emily hesitated. It was a question she hadn't expected, and for a moment, she thought about the long hours, the stress, and the way she'd been treated. I don't know, she admitted. Keanu nodded, as if he understood exactly what she was feeling. That's fair. Sometimes life pushes us towards something better, even when it's scary to let go. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. Handing it to her, he said, "Take this. It's an address. I think you should come by tomorrow." Emily unfolded the paper and stared at it, confused. The address wasn't familiar, but she could tell from Keanu's expression that it was important. "What is this?" she asked cautiously. He smiled but didn't answer directly. "You'll see." Before she could press further, the bell above the door jingled again, and another man walked in. He was dressed in a crisp suit and carried an air of authority. Keanu's face lit up when he saw him. "Perfect timing," he said, waving him over. The man approached, shaking Keanu's hand before turning to Emily. "You must be Emily," he said warmly. "My name's Daniel. I'm part of a project Keanu's been working on, and he told me about what happened here today. I think you'll be a perfect fit for what we're building." Emily blinked, completely overwhelmed. "I don't understand what project." Keanu stepped in, his tone filled with excitement. "It's something close to my heart. We're opening a community center, somewhere people can come for food, shelter, and support when they need it most. No questions, no judgment. We've been looking for the right people to help us run it, and I think you'd be perfect." For a moment, Emily couldn't speak. The weight of everything hit her all at once. The homeless man she had helped, the loss of her job, and now this incredible opportunity. "You want me to work there?" she finally managed to ask, her voice trembling. Keanu nodded. "I don't just want you to work there. I want you to help lead it. Your kindness, your instinct to help without hesitation. That's exactly what we need." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, and she struggled to find the words to respond. I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel like enough." Keanu placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Just keep being who you are. That's all the thanks I need." As the reality of the moment sank in, the customers in the diner broke into applause. Even the homeless man in the corner clapped, his face lighting up with hope. Mr. Grayson, meanwhile, looked pale and defeated. He muttered something under his breath about needing to step outside and shuffled out the door, clearly realizing he had lost more than just control of the room. But just as Emily thought the whirlwind of events was over, Keanu turned to her one last time. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice steady. She looked at him, her heart still racing. "What is it?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded check. Handing it to her, he said, "Consider this a starting point. For the center for you however you need it. It's yours." Emily unfolded the check, and her breath caught in her throat. The amount was staggering, far beyond anything she had ever imagined. This is too much," she stammered, her hands shaking. Keanu smiled, his eyes kind. "It's not about the money. It's about the impact. You already showed the world what a little kindness can do. Now, imagine what you can do with this." The room fell silent again, the weight of the moment washing over everyone. Emily couldn't stop the tears streaming down her face, but this time, they weren't tears of sadness. As the applause started up again, Emily looked around the diner, taking it all in. The homeless man in the corner, the customers who had supported her, and Keanu Reeves, someone she never thought she'd meet, let alone have changed her life. But then, as she glanced back at the counter, she noticed something strange. On the spot where Mr. Grayson had stood just moments ago was a small, folded piece of paper. Curious, she walked over and picked it up. Unfolding it, she found a single sentence scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Kindness isn't a weakness, but I had to learn that the hard way." Emily stared at the note, her mind racing. Mr. Grayson was gone, and something about the message felt oddly final. She turned to Keanu, who simply gave her a knowing smile. As the bell jingled one last time and the door swung shut, Emily realized this wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of something far greater. Her life had changed forever, and she was ready to step into the unknown, armed with nothing but her kindness and a renewed sense of purpose. And as for Keanu, he left as quietly as he had arrived, disappearing into the night with a mission accomplished and a few more lives forever touched. The diner slowly returned to life, though the air still hummed with a strange sense of wonder. Customers resumed their conversations, but every so often, they cast glances toward Emily, the homeless man, or the door through which Keanu had disappeared. It felt as though everyone had witnessed something extraordinary, a moment that couldn't quite be put into words. Emily stood behind the counter, still holding the note Mr. Grayson had left. She reread the words over and over, each time feeling the weight of their meaning. For all his strictness and bluster, even Mr. Grayson seemed to have been touched by the events of the day. She couldn't help but wonder where he had gone and whether he would carry this lesson with him.
She hoped so.
As for the homeless man, he sat quietly, finishing the last bite of his meal. His face was softer now, no longer weighed down by the same heaviness that had clung to him when he first stepped into the diner. Emily walked over to him, her voice gentle. "Are you doing okay?" He looked up at her, his eyes shimmering. I don't even know how to thank you," he said, his voice shaky. "I didn't expect anyone to care. I've been invisible for so long." Emily smiled, her heart full. "You're not invisible. And you never will be to me." The man hesitated, then added, "That man, Keanu, why would he do this? For me, for you?" Emily thought for a moment before replying. "I think it's because he understands what it's like to struggle, to feel like the world has forgotten you. And maybe he just believes that one act of kindness can start something bigger." The man nodded, his lips trembling as he fought back tears. "Well, you and him, you've changed my life. I don't know what's next for me, but I'll never forget this." Emily reached out and placed her hand over his. "You're not alone. And if you ever need help, you know where to find me." The man smiled for the first time, a genuine smile that lit up his face. For the first time in years, he felt hope, a feeling he thought he'd lost forever. As the day went on, the story of what had happened spread. Customers shared their version of events with friends and family, and soon, the little diner became the center of attention. By the next morning, the news had reached social media, with photos and posts praising Emily's compassion, Keanu's generosity, and the incredible turn of events. Emily hadn't gone back to the diner after leaving that day. Instead, she spent the evening reflecting on what had happened and trying to make sense of the whirlwind her life had become. She stared at the address Keanu had given her, wondering what awaited her there. The next morning, she decided to go. As she approached the building, her heart raced with nervous anticipation. It was a modest but welcoming space with large windows and a bright sign that read, "The Beacon Center." Inside, she found Keanu waiting for her, along with Daniel and a few others who had clearly been working hard to bring the center to life. "Welcome," Keanu said with a warm smile. "We've been waiting for you." Emily stepped inside, marveling at the space. It was filled with light and life, comfortable seating areas, shelves lined with books, and a kitchen already stocked with supplies. There were bulletin boards filled with resources for job opportunities, housing assistance, and counseling services. It wasn't just a shelter or a soup kitchen. It was a place of hope. "This is incredible," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu nodded. "This is what it's all about. Giving people a chance, a place where they can feel seen and supported. And you, Emily, are going to help us make it work." Over the next few weeks, Emily threw herself into the project. She worked with Keanu and the team to create programs for the community, from hot meals and job training to mental health support and mentorship. The Beacon Center quickly became a lifeline for many, including the homeless man she had helped that day. His name was Robert, and he soon became a regular volunteer, eager to give back to the place that had given him a second chance. As the weeks turned into months, Emily's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The kindness she had shown to a single person had rippled outward, touching countless lives and creating something truly extraordinary. But the most surprising twist came one afternoon when she received a letter. It was from Mr. Grayson. The letter was short but heartfelt. He apologized for the way he had treated her and admitted that he had been wrong. He wrote about how that day had forced him to rethink his values and how he had decided to make some changes in his own life. He even included a donation for the Beacon Center, a gesture that left Emily speechless. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it away, a reminder that even the hardest hearts could change. As the story of the Beacon Center continued to grow, so did its impact. News outlets picked up on the incredible chain of events that had started with a single meal in a small diner. Emily became a symbol of compassion and resilience, her story inspiring others to look for opportunities to help those around them. And as for Keanu, he continued to visit the Beacon Center quietly, always refusing any publicity or fanfare. For him, it wasn't about recognition, it was about doing what felt right. One evening, as Emily stood by the window of the center, watching the sun set, Keanu joined her. "You've done something amazing here," he said, his voice filled with pride. "We've done something amazing," she corrected, smiling. "I couldn't have done this without you." He shrugged lightly, a twinkle in his eye. "You had it in you all along. I just gave you a little nudge." As the light faded and the first stars appeared in the sky, Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for Keanu or the center, but for everything that had led her here. Even the difficult moments, the ones that had seemed impossible to overcome, had brought her to this place, this purpose. Her story wasn't just about one act of kindness. It was a reminder that even the smallest actions could spark something far greater than anyone could imagine. And as she stood there, she made a silent promise to herself to always choose kindness, no matter how hard it might seem, because kindness could change the world, one person, one moment at a time.